How was your day? Maybe someone promised you something, and maybe every time you reached for it, it moved just a little further away. There's a little man in the Irish hedges who knows that feeling well. He makes a fortune one stitch at a time and gives it away to no one. If today wore you down, he would understand. So let the day go now. Let it loosen. Come with me to the edge of a green field where the grass is wet and a small hammer is tapping somewhere you cannot quite see. A man's hand closes, quick, sure, around something small and warm and struggling. He has waited his whole life for this, and he will not look away, not even once. The little man points. There, he says, your gold, beneath that stalk. And the field, 1,000 yellow stalks, every one the same, waits to swallow the truth. That is the trouble with fairy gold. You can find it. You can even hold the one who guards it. But keeping it, that is a different thing entirely. The old people said it plainly. A leprechaun will give you anything, a wish, a road, a crock of coins. He only asks one thing in return, that you trust him. Just for a moment. And maybe you already know how that ends. The one who must not look away, looks away. We all do, in the end. That is the part of the story that stays with you. This is what we do here, every week. One old story. One night. Something that happened a long time ago and still has something to say about now. Get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow. Find your warmth. If you drift off before the end, the little man won't mind. He has watched over sleeping fields for a very long time. This is only the beginning of the story. The crock, the trick, the long walk to the rainbow that's still ahead. But not tonight. Tonight, just this. If tonight felt like something, subscribe. We'll be here next week. Another story, another quiet night like this. Now, back to ours. So, a field in Ireland long ago. The barley was green and the man who worked it was tired in the way that honest work makes you tired. His name was Donal. He had a small white cottage, a turf fire, and a wife named Una who could make a hard year feel soft. They had enough, not much more, but enough. One evening, walking the hedge, Donal heard a sound he did not know. Small, steady, tap, 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 like a tiny hammer, somewhere in the green. He stood very still. The old folk had a saying for that sound. They said it meant a shoemaker was near, not a man, the other kind, the lone kind. His grandmother's voice came back to him then. If ever you catch one, she used to whisper, hold him fast, and whatever he says, do not take your eyes away. Donal did not move. The tapping went on in the dark hedge, and somewhere inside him, an old, dangerous, very human thought began to wake. What if it was true? The next evening, Donal came back to the hedge. He told himself he was only checking the wall. He was not. He was listening for the small hammer again. For a long while there was nothing, only the wind in the barley and a thrush settling for the night. Donal almost laughed at himself. Then it came. Tap, tap, tap. He crept closer. The sound did not stop. Whoever made it was not afraid or did not know he was there. Donal lowered himself into the wet grass and waited. Through the leaves he saw a glow. Not firelight. Softer, gold and green together. The way moss looks when the sun is low, and in the middle of it something moved. It was a little man, no taller than Donal's forearm, bent over something tiny held on his knee, working it with a small bright tool. Stitch, pull, tap, a shoe. Just one shoe, not a pair. The old tales said that too. The lone shoemaker only ever mends the one. No one quite knew why. Donal had stopped breathing. For a moment Donal forgot the gold entirely. He simply watched. There was something steadying in it, a creature working quietly at one small task, asking nothing of the world. Maybe you know that kind of watching, not waiting to take anything, just resting your eyes on something that keeps going, steady and small, while the rest of the day falls quiet. But the thought came back, the way it always does. His grandmother's voice, the gold, a whole crock of it, the tales said, enough to end every hard winter forever. He thought of Una, mending the same shawl for the 3rd year. He thought of the lean months. The gold did not feel like greed then. It felt like rest, like being able to breathe. That is how it begins, every time. Not with greed, with tiredness, with love even. The wanting wears an honest face. That is what makes it so hard to refuse. He did not move that night. He went home, but he could not unhear the tapping. It followed him to the cottage, to the table, into his sleep. Tap, tap, tap. Una saw it on him at supper. The far-off look, the way his ear kept turning to the door. "What did you find out there?" she asked. He only shook his head. "How do you tell your wife you have seen a thing that should not be? That you mean to go back and catch it and ask it for the world?" He kept it to himself. That was his first mistake. All the next day in the field, the work felt slow and far away. His hands cut the weeds. His mind was already in the hedge rehearsing the grab. Quick, sure, and then, hold on. He remembered the rest of his grandmother's warning, the part he had tried to forget. "They are not cruel," she had said, "but they are quick. Quicker than any wish you make." "Hold him by the coat," she had said. "Look in his eyes. And do not look at anything he points to. He will try to make you look. That is the whole game." Donal said the words to himself like a prayer, over and over, until they wore smooth. Do not look away. Do not look away. He did not yet understand how hard that is. Evening came down gold and slow. The barley turned to brass in the last light. Donal walked to the hedge with his heart loud in his ears, and he waited for the tapping to begin. Tap. There it was. Closer to the gap tonight, as if the little man had grown careless or curious. Donal lowered himself and crept the last few feet on his hands. There he was, Lorcan, though Donal did not know the name yet, bent over his one small shoe, humming something old and tuneless, entirely at peace in his little patch of light. Here's the part the tales never quite say. For one breath Donal almost let him be, almost left him to his shoe and his humming, the wanting and the kindness balanced on a knife's edge. Then he thought of Una's mended shawl, and the knife's edge tipped, his hand shot out through the leaves quick and sure, and closed around the little green coat. The little man went stiff as a held breath. The humming stopped, slowly, slowly. Two sharp green eyes turned up to meet Donal's, and a voice dry as autumn leaves said, "Well now." "Well now," said Lorcan again, a man with a good grip and a bad idea. The two so often come together. Donal said nothing. He only held on, and he did not look away. "You know the rules, then?" Lorcan said. "Most don't. Most look away in the first minute, and off I go." He sighed as if disappointed in the whole arrangement. "But not you, stubborn one." "I'll make you the offer, since you've earned it," Lorcan said. "I have a crock of gold, old gold, buried gold. Hold my gaze and walk with me, and I'll take you to it. That's the bargain." "Why would you give it away?" Donal asked, still holding tight. Lorcan laughed, a small, surprising sound, like a coin dropped on stone. "Give? Oh, I never give. I only show. The keeping is your part." Stay with that line for a moment. Before we walk on, he never gives, he only shows. The keeping is your part. The old story is telling you the ending already, softly, without naming it. Donal did not hear the warning in it. People rarely do. He heard only the word gold and the word crock, and the years of lean winters they might undo. "Show me," he said. "Now." "Now," he says. Lorcan shook his small head. "There's always a now with you tall folk." "Very well. Out of the hedge, then. Mind the thorns, and mind your eyes. Always. Mind your eyes." And so they came out of the hedge together. A tall, tired farmer and a small green man cupped in his hands, into the wide, dark field, under the first cold stars. The bargain had begun. "Which way?" Donal asked. Lorcan tilted his head toward the far hills where the last gray light still clung. "Where the rainbow drinks," he said. "It's a walk. You'll want your patience and your grip." They walked. Donal kept his eyes on the little man's face, and the little man kept up a soft stream of talk, the weather, the barley, the price of wool, anything, anything to make him glance away. "Fine herd of cattle off to your left," Lorcan said lightly. "Finest I've seen this side of the river." Donal nearly turned. Nearly. He felt his eyes pull. He held them hard on the little face. "No cattle," Donal said through his teeth. Lorcan chuckled. No cattle. Worth a try, though. And on they walked, the man and his stubborn eyes, into the deepening night. This is the heart of it, you know. The little man cannot break free while he is watched. The whole power of the holder is one unbroken look. Simple, and almost impossible to keep. Have you ever tried to hold one thought, and one only, while the whole world tugs at your sleeve? That is what Donald was doing. One look, nothing else, for as long as it took. They crossed a stream on stepping stones. Lorcan timed each trick for the dangerous moments. Mind your footing, he'd say, just as Donald needed to look down, and still the farmer kept his eyes up. You're a hard man to cheat, Lorcan admitted at last, almost fond. I'll grant you that. Most are gone by the stream. You might just see the gold yet. Donald's heart lifted. He should have known better. For when a leprechaun begins to praise you, that is exactly when you should hold tightest of all. But that is a lesson for the climb ahead. First, let the old story breathe a moment and tell you where it came from. The old Irish did not invent the lone shoemaker to frighten anyone. They invented him to explain a small mystery, the little sounds in the hedge at dusk, and the coins folk sometimes found and lost. His very name, some say, comes from old words meaning small body. Others say one shoemaker. Either way, the heart of it is the same. A solitary craftsman, always alone, always working. And the gold? The Irish knew where stories of buried gold come from. Old hoards in the bog, coins from invaders long gone. Treasure that surfaced, then sank again in ground that never holds still. So the little man became the keeper of all that, the found and the lost, the promise and the vanishing. He was the face the people gave to the way fortune teases, and slips and will not be held. Remember that as we walk on. He is not a villain. He is a lesson wearing a green coat. Now back to the field, where a tired farmer is still holding tight, and the hills are drawing near. The ground began to rise. The barley fell behind, and rough pasture took its place, then heather, then the first soft give of bog underfoot. Lorcan grew quieter as they climbed. By now you should know who matters in this story. A farmer who wants rest more than riches, a wife who waits in a lit cottage, and a small man who has never once been kept. And you should know what they are walking toward. A crock of gold that has been found 100 times and kept, the little man would tell you, exactly never. Tell me something, Donald said, to keep himself awake. If no one ever keeps it, why make the offer at all? Lorcan was quiet a moment. Then, because you all need to learn it for yourselves. Learn what? Donald asked. But the little man only smiled and looked away to the hills, and would not answer. Some things, it seemed, you could not be told, only shown. The bog spread before them now, wide and pale and still. Pools of black water held the stars. Tufts of white bog cotton glowed faintly. It was beautiful, and it was a place to be careful. Careful now, Lorcan said, and for once he meant it kindly. The bog takes the unwary. Step where I say. Left foot there. There's a path through, if you trust it. Donald trusted, and stepped, and held his gaze. It struck Donald, halfway across, that the little man could have let him drown, could have pointed him wrong and slipped free in the panic, but he had not. Why not? He filed the question away. The truth, though Donald could not know it yet, was simpler than tricks. The little man did not need him to drown. He only needed him to blink, and a blink, in the end, comes free to everyone. They reached the far side as the moon rode high. Ahead, the ground rose once more toward a low green hill, and on its slope, faint and trembling, the first colors of a rainbow began to form in the night mist. A rainbow at night, Donald breathed. I never knew there could be such a thing. Lorcan smiled. There are a great many things you never knew. That's rather the trouble with you, and the joy of you. There, said Lorcan softly, where it meets the grass. That's where the crock sleeps. We're nearly there now, farmer, nearly there. And Donald's hands tightened, and his tired eyes burned, and he did not look away. Maybe you can feel it too, that nearness, the thing you have wanted, finally within reach, the breath you hold without meaning to. Stay there a moment, in the almost. It is its own kind of sweetness. They stopped at the place. The rainbow's colors fell soft around them, gold and rose and green. The grass glowed faintly. Somewhere beneath their feet, the crock was waiting, Donald could almost feel its weight. "Here," Donald asked. "Beneath this very spot?" Lorcan nodded slowly. "Beneath that very spot, a spade's depth no more. The gold of 100 lost years. Yours, if you can dig it before it moves." Before it moves, there it was. The catch, spoken plainly, and still Donald barely heard it. He had no spade. The cottage was an hour's walk and more. He would have to leave and dig and come back, and the spot looked like every other. His mind raced. He could carry the little man home, fetch a spade, walk back. But the rainbow would be gone by then, the spot lost. Or he could mark it. Something tied to the grass. Something only he would know. Around his knee, beneath his trouser, Donald wore a garter of red wool. Una had dyed it herself. It was the brightest thing he owned. Slowly, carefully, never moving his eyes, he worked it loose with one hand. He knelt, eyes never leaving Lorcan's face, and tied the red garter around the tallest stalk of ragwort on the glowing spot, a bright red knot, easy to find. "There," he said. "Now I'll know it, whatever you do." Lorcan watched the knot being tied, and a strange expression crossed his small face. Not anger, not fear. Something almost like respect. "Clever," he murmured. "Oh, that is clever. Few think of the garter." "Now," said Donald, breathless, "I'll make you swear. Swear you won't dig it up before I'm back. Swear you won't move it, on whatever a little man swears on." And Lorcan grew very still and very solemn. "I swear it," said Lorcan, and laid his small hand on his own heart. "By the hedge and the hollow and the one shoe I shall never finish. I will not dig up that gold, nor move it, not 1 inch. This I swear." Donald's heart soared, an oath, a mark, a spot he could find. The gold was as good as his. He had done the impossible. He had outlasted a leprechaun, or so for one shining moment, he believed. "Then our bargain's done," said Lorcan softly. "You may set me down, and go for your spade, and come back to your fortune. I've sworn, and a sworn leprechaun does not lie. Go on now, go quick, before the dawn." And here, in the very moment of winning, Donald made his choice. He looked at the red garter, bright, sure, unmistakable. He looked at the valley below, and certain at last he opened his hand. Lorcan stepped down onto the grass, light as a leaf. He tipped his battered green hat. "A pleasure, farmer," he said. "Truly, you held longer than most. Run home now. The gold's right there, right under the red," and he smiled. Donald ran down the hill, across the firm bog path, through the heather, down toward the lit window and the spade in the shed. His heart sang the whole way. Gold, gold, gold beneath the red. He woke Una, breathless, wild-eyed. "Gold," he gasped. "On the hill. I marked it. A spade. Where's the spade?" She caught his arms, frightened and amazed, and asked no questions. She knew that look. She had never seen it on him before. He found the spade. He kissed Una's forehead. "When I come back," he said, "we'll never be cold again. Wait up for me. Keep the fire." And he was gone into the dark, the spade over his shoulder, running for the hill. Back up through the heather. Back across the bog, the path harder to find now without a little voice to guide him. But he found it. Up the last slope, lungs burning, to the place of the rainbow, to the red garter, to the gold. He came over the rise, spade ready, eyes searching for that one bright knot of red, and he stopped, and his heart, which had been singing all the way up the hill, went very, very quiet, because what he saw, we will come to in a moment. Every stalk wore a red garter, every single one, as far as the gray dawn light reached, 1,000 tall ragwort stems, and tied to each, bright and identical, a knot of red wool. He had not lied. The little man had sworn not to dig the gold, not to move it. And he had not. He had simply tied 1,000 red garters, and let the field itself swallow the one that mattered. Donald walked into the field. He turned in a slow circle. Red, red, red. 1,000 promises, and not one of them true. He sank to his knees in the wet grass and laughed, a small, broken, astonished laugh. He should have dug, one spot, then another, then another. But the field was wide, and the gold was a spade's depth down, and a man could dig for a year and never find it. The little man had known that. Of course he had known. Maybe you have felt this exact thing. Not the gold, the trick of it. The moment you realize the rule you trusted was never the whole rule. That you were outsmarted while you were busy being clever. It is a quiet, hollow feeling. And yet, sitting there in the cold field, something odd happened in Donald's chest. The despair was real, but under it, faint and unexpected, was something that felt almost like admiration. The little man had played fair and won. For the little man had kept his every word, not dug, not moved, sworn truly. The gold was still there, exactly where it had been. Donald had simply asked the wrong oath. He had guarded against the wrong trick. The sun came up while he sat there. It found him in the middle of his field of red, an empty spade beside him, the dew soaking through his knees, and slowly, stiffly, Donald got to his feet and turned toward home. He left the garters where they were. All 1,000 of them. He could not bring himself to untie even one. Let the field keep its joke. Let the gold sleep. He walked down the hill empty-handed into the rising day. Una was waiting in the doorway. She had kept the fire, as he asked. She saw his empty hands, his bent shoulders, the spade with no gold on it, and she did not say a word. She only opened her arms. Inside, by the fire, he told her everything. The tapping, the little man, the bog, the rainbow, the garter, the oath, the field of 1,000 red knots. She listened to all of it, and when he finished, she was quiet a long while. You held his gaze across a whole bog, she said at last, in the dark. For hours, Donald, no one in my grandmother's stories ever held one that long. She took his hand. You didn't fail. You nearly did the impossible. But I opened my hand, he said. Right at the end, I let him go. Una shook her head gently. You'd already lost the moment you tied the garter and trusted it. The opening was just the last small step. The real slip was earlier. It always is. Remember that for later. The real slip is always earlier than we think. By the time we feel ourselves let go, we have already been letting go for a long while. The little man only collects what we have quietly set down. Donald slept that day, the deep, heavy sleep of a man who has walked all night, and in his sleep he heard it again, far off and soft. Tap, 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 the little hammer mending its one endless shoe. When he woke, the shame had loosened. What stayed was the strangeness of it, that he had met one of the old ones, and lived, and lost, and somehow felt richer for the meeting than the gold could have made him. He did not understand that yet, but it was there. Days passed, the barley grew. Donald worked his field as he always had, but now his eye would drift to the hawthorn hedge at dusk, half hoping, half dreading, to hear the small hammer start again. But the hedge stayed quiet. Whatever the little man was, he did not work the same hedge twice for a man who had caught him. He had moved on, the way luck moves on to some other field, some other tired dreamer. It might have ended there. A strange night, a good story for the fire, a lesson half learned. But stories like this do not stay in one cottage. Donald had told Una. Una had told no one, but Donald one market day told a friend. He meant no harm. He told it as a marvel, a thing to shake your head at. But the friend told 2 others, and they told more, and by the next market the whole valley knew. A leprechaun in Donald's hedge, with a crock of gold. And here's where the trouble truly began, for most who heard it laughed. But some did not laugh. Some leaned in, and their eyes went narrow and bright, and they began quietly to make plans of their own. Chief among them was a man named Cormac, a big man, a loud man, who farmed more land than anyone and wanted more still. He heard the tale, and he did not hear a lesson. He heard a treasure left lying about by a fool. If a soft fool like Donald nearly caught the little man, Cormac said to his brothers, imagine what hard men could do. We'll not open our hands. We'll not tie a garter and trust an oath. We'll catch him, and we'll squeeze. Word of this reached Donald, as word does, and it troubled him deeply. He had caught the little man and let him go, and felt the strange peace of it. The thought of Cormac's hard hands on that small green coat made him sick. It surprised him, that sickness. The little man had tricked him out of a fortune. By rights Donald should have cheered to see him hunted, but he did not. Somewhere in that long night's walk, the little man had stopped being his enemy. I should warn him, Donald said to Una that night. She looked at him over the fire. Warn a leprechaun? She said. Donald, he's older than the hills. He's been hunted by hard men for 1,000 years. He doesn't need your warning. But Donald was not so sure. Maybe he doesn't need it, Donal said, but I'd sleep better for the giving of it. And there it was, the thing that set Donal apart from Cormac. One man wanted to take from the little fellow, the other only wanted to do right by him. But how do you warn a creature who hides from all the world? Donal did not know where the little man's new hedge was. He could walk the whole valley and never find that soft gold-green glow again, unless he thought of the old woman. There was an old woman who lived by the holy well at the valley's head. Sile, the people called her. Older than anyone could say, she knew the rules of the little folk the way Donal knew his own field. If anyone could help, it was her. So Donal walked to the well at the head of the valley, where the water came cold from under the hill, and the rowan dropped its red berries in the dark pool, and the old woman was there, as if she had been waiting for him. "You're the man who caught the shoemaker," Sile said before he could speak. Her milky eyes seemed to look straight through him, and let him go. "And now you've come about Cormac and his hard hands. Sit, you've much to learn and little time." "First," she said, "understand what you met. The little man is not yours to protect, nor Cormac's to rob. He is luck itself, walking about in a green coat. You cannot save luck, you cannot steal it, you can only meet it well or badly." "You met him well," Sile went on. "You held his gaze, and when you lost, you bore it without rage. That is rarer than you know. Most men, when the gold turns to garters, go mad with anger. You laughed. He'll remember that." "He'll remember it?" Donal asked. "He remembers every soul who catches him," said Sile, "the cruel ones and the kind. He's caught more than the gold in that long memory of his, and the ones who let go gently, those he sometimes comes back for." "Comes back for?" Donal's heart stirred. "Don't go hoping for gold," Sile said sharply, reading him. "Not gold. Something else. Something he gives only to the ones who didn't grab. But that's not why you came. You came about Cormac. So listen. Cormac means to catch the little man and not let go, no matter what he points to. That is what the hard ones always try. And here is the thing they never understand. You cannot squeeze luck. The harder you grip it, the less you hold." "So Cormac will fail?" Donal asked. "Cormac will fail," said Sile. "They always fail, but failing, the hard ones do harm. They trample hedges. They burn fields hunting the glow. They poison the very luck of a place. That is what you should fear, not for the little man, for the valley." Stay with that for a moment. The danger was never that Cormac would win. The danger was the ruin he would make in losing. That is how greed works, often. Not by taking the prize, but by wrecking everything around the prize it cannot take. "What can I do?" Donal asked. The old woman was quiet a long moment. Then she said, "You can find the little man first. Warn him, if it eases you, though he'll know already, and then you can do the one thing Cormac never will. You can ask him what he truly wants." "What a leprechaun wants," Donal repeated. "No one ever asks them," said Sile. "In 1,000 years of catching, no one has asked the little man what he wants. They ask for gold, for wishes, for the crock, but never, never what he longs for himself." The words sank into Donal slowly. A creature older than the hills, caught 1,000 times, robbed and squeezed and tricked, and in all those years not one soul had thought to ask what he himself might want. The loneliness of it struck him hard. "Where do I find him?" Donal asked, his voice low now. Sile smiled, the first smile she had given him. "Ah, now you're asking the right way. Follow the one shoe, he's always mending the one shoe. Find out whose shoe it is, and you'll find him." "Whose shoe?" Donal frowned. "He only ever mends one. I always wondered." Sile's smile widened. "Everyone wonders. Few ask. That's a riddle for you to carry, farmer. Why does the lone shoemaker forever mend a single shoe, and never the pair?" Donal carried the riddle home with him, turning it over and over. Why one shoe? A shoemaker who could make any fortune, mending the same single shoe for 1,000 years. There was a sadness in it he could not yet name. That night he could not sleep. He lay listening to Una's quiet breathing and the settle of the turf in the grate, and the riddle turned and turned. One shoe, always one, for whom does a lonely man make a single shoe? And toward dawn, half dreaming, an answer drifted up to him. You make a single shoe for someone who has only one foot to fill. For someone gone. For a memory. For a child, perhaps, who never grew into the second. He sat up in the dark, his heart aching, not knowing if he was right. He did not know if it was true, but the guess changed something in him. The little man stopped being a trickster who stole his gold and became a person. Old, lonely, carrying a grief into which a whole fortune had poured and never filled it. In the morning, Donal made up his mind. He would find the little man, not for the gold. The gold could stay buried under its 1,000 garters forever. He would find him to warn him of Cormac, yes. But more than that, he would find him to ask the question no one had ever asked. Una pressed bread and cheese into his hands and a kiss to his cheek. "Go gently," she said. "And Donal, if you do find him, and he offers you the gold again." She paused. He smiled. "I'll not take it," he said. "Not this time, I've learned that much." And he set off. But first, let the old story breathe again. The gold the leprechaun guards was never really money, you know. In the oldest tellings, the crock at the rainbow's foot is something stranger. It is everything you ever wanted, buried just out of reach, in ground that will not hold still. And the rule, never look away, that was never just about a leprechaun. The old people knew how the mind works. They knew that the thing you want most slips free in the very moment your attention wavers. They built a whole little man around that simple truth. The Irish called such beings the solitary fairies, apart from the trooping kind who danced in rings. The leprechaun worked alone, owned his own hoard, answered to no court. He was the patron, you might say, of the lonely craftsmen everywhere. And the single shoe? Scholars argue, but the folk had their own quiet answers. Some said he could only ever finish half a task, like fortune itself, always almost. Others said the one shoe was for someone he had loved and lost. Both, perhaps, are true. Hold both those answers as we go on. The little man who is always almost. The little man who mends one shoe for a love long gone. Now back to Donal, climbing into the hills, looking for a glow that does not want to be found. Donal walked the valley for 3 days. He listened at every hedge. He knelt by every likely hollow. He found rabbit holes and bird nests and old badger sets, but no soft gold-green glow, no small steady tapping. The little man did not want to be found. On the third evening, footsore and discouraged, Donal sat down on a stone wall to eat the last of his bread, and as he sat he heard, far off, a different kind of sound, not the small hammer. Voices, rough, loud voices, and the crash of something being torn apart. Cormac, it had to be. Donal forgot his sore feet and ran toward the sound, over a rise, and there below him in the failing light, he saw them, Cormac and his brothers, tearing a long hedgerow to pieces, hunting for a glow. They had torches, they had hooks and spades. They were working the hedge from both ends, ripping the old hawthorn out by the roots, certain the little man was hiding somewhere within, and maybe Donal's stomach turned, maybe he was. Donal did not stop to think. He ran down the slope shouting, "Stop, Cormac, stop, you'll ruin the whole hedge and find nothing." "That's not how it's done." The big man turned, torch in hand, and grinned a hard grin. "Donal," he said, "come to show us the way?" "I've come to tell you you're wasting your strength," Donal said, breathing hard. "You can't catch him by tearing hedges. He's not in the wood, he's in the watching. Put down the torches before you burn half the valley, chasing a thing you'll never hold." Cormac laughed. "You held him and let him go, you soft fool. You had the gold and tied a garter like a child and lost it, and now you'd lecture me." He stepped close, torch crackling. "Go home, Donal. The gold's for hard hands now." "I had him," Donal said quietly, "and I learned something you never will. Tear every hedge in Ireland, Cormac. Burn them all. You'll never hold the little man, because you don't understand the first thing about him. You think he keeps gold? He doesn't. He keeps a lesson, and you're not ready to learn it." For a moment, in the torchlight, something flickered in Cormac's eyes. Doubt, maybe, or fear. But greed is a stubborn master. He shook it off, and his face hardened again. "Pretty words," he spat. "Brothers, keep digging, old fool's just trying to keep the gold for himself." And then it happened. From deep in the part of the hedge they had not yet reached, a soft gold-green glow flared, just for an instant, and a small steady tapping rang out, clear in the sudden dark. Tap, 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 the little man. He was there after all. Everyone froze, the glow, the tapping. Cormac's eyes lit with savage hunger. "There," he roared. "There he is, take him!" And the three brothers lunged for the glowing hedge all at once, torches and hooks raised, a tangle of greed and fire. But the glow was not where they grabbed. It flared again, 10 feet to the left. They spun, lunged again, and it was behind them now, soft and mocking. Tap, tap. The little man was leading them, the way a will-o'-the-wisp leads a traveler off the safe path. Donald watched, half in fear and half in wonder. He understood now what Sile had meant. They could never catch him. The little man was playing with them, drawing them in circles, and every grab tore another hole in the hedge and found nothing but leaves. But the glow was leading them somewhere. Donald saw it before they did. Step by step, lunge by lunge, the little man was drawing Cormac and his brothers toward the dark edge of the bog, the same treacherous bog Donald had crossed with a guiding voice. And there was no guiding voice for Cormac. The little man would lead them onto the soft ground in the dark, where one wrong step swallowed a man whole, and slip away while they floundered. It was not a trick anymore. It was a trap, and it could be a grave. Donald had a choice to make, and only a heartbeat to make it. Cormac was a hard man, a greedy man, a man who had scorned him. By every rule of grudges, Donald could have stood back and let the bog take its due, but that was not the kind of man Donald was. "Cormac," Donald bellowed, running. "Stop! The bog, it's the bog. He's leading you into the bog. One more step and you'll drown, all three of you. Stop, you fools, stop." And he threw himself forward, catching the nearest brother by the cloak just as his foot found soft ground. The brother fell back hard onto firm ground, gasping. Cormac and the other brother froze, 1 foot each over the dark water, and understood all at once how close they had come. The glow ahead of them winked out. The tapping stopped. Silence fell over the bog. For a long moment no one spoke. The three hard men stood trembling at the edge of the grave they had nearly walked into, and Donald stood behind them, breathing hard, the man they had scorned, who had just pulled them back from death. Cormac turned slowly. The hardness had drained from his face. In the dying torchlight he looked, for the first time, simply afraid and ashamed. "You pulled us back," he said, "after all I said to you. Why?" Donald only shrugged, tired to his bones. "Because no gold's worth a man's life," Donald said. "Not yours, not mine. He'd have led you under the bog and slipped away, and your wives would have waited for 3 men who never came home. The little man doesn't kill, Cormac. He only shows you where your own greed would take you. You just have to be alive to learn it." Cormac was quiet a long time. Then he did a thing his brothers had never seen him do. He dropped his torch into the wet ground, where it hissed and died, and he held out his hard hand to Donald. "I've been a fool," he said, "a greedy, dangerous fool. Thank you for my life." Donald took the hand and shook it, and in that simple grip in the dark, the danger to the valley ended. No more burned hedges, no more torchlit hunts. Cormac and his brothers walked home chastened, alive, and quieter men than they had been. Donald watched them go, and then he was alone, in the dark, at the edge of the bog, footsore and weary, and no closer to finding the little man he had come 3 days to warn. He sat down heavily on a stone and let out a long breath. "Well now," said a dry, familiar voice from beside his elbow. "That was a fine bit of work, farmer, pulling hard men back from my bog. You've cost me a most satisfying trick." Donald's heart leapt. He turned his head, slowly, and there he was, Lorcan, sitting on the stone beside him, mending a single shoe. There he sat, calm as anything, the soft glow rising around him, the small shoe braced on his knee, the all moving slow, as if he had not just led 3 men toward their deaths, as if he had been waiting on this stone all along for Donald to arrive. And here was the strange thing. Donald did not lunge. He did not grab. He had walked 3 days to find this creature, and now that he sat an arm's length away, mending his endless shoe, Donald simply sat with him. 2 tired beings on a stone in the dark. "You're not grabbing me," Lorcan observed after a while, without looking up from his shoe. 3 days you've hunted me through the hills, and now you sit there like a stone yourself. Have you no want of gold tonight, farmer?" Donald shook his head slowly. "No gold," Donald said. "I came to warn you about Cormac, but you knew about him before I did, I think. So that's no use to you, and I came." He paused, suddenly shy of it. "I came to ask you something, a question, if you'll let me." The little man's all stopped moving. Slowly, he set the shoe down on his knee and looked up at Donald full in the face, and there was something guarded in his ancient eyes, something that had not been there during all his easy tricks. "A question," he said carefully. "Ask it then, we'll see." But Donald found, now the moment had come, that he could not simply blurt it out. It felt too large, too tender. So instead he asked the smaller riddle first, the one Sile had given him. "The shoe," he said softly. "You only ever mend the one, why one, and never the pair?" The little man went very still. For a long moment he said nothing at all, and the bog was silent around them, and the mist drifted, and the stars wheeled slowly overhead. When at last he spoke, his dry voice had gone soft and very old. "No one," he said, "has ever asked me that, in 1,000 years." "They ask for the gold," Lorcan said quietly. "Always the gold. The crock, the wish, the fortune. They grab, and they squeeze, and they trick, and they never once look at the shoe in my hands and wonder whose small foot it was meant for." He looked up at Donald. "But you wondered?" "I wondered," Donald said, "and I had a guess, a sad one. Tell me if I'm wrong." He took a breath. "I think you make a single shoe because there's only one small foot left to wear it. Someone you loved, someone you lost, and the shoe is how you keep mending the missing." The little man did not answer in words. He simply bowed his small head over the shoe, and his shoulders trembled once, and a single tear fell bright onto the worn green leather, and Donald understood that he had guessed true, and he reached out, slow and gentle, and laid one large hand softly on the little man's shaking back. They sat like that for a long while, the tired farmer and the grieving little man, on a stone at the edge of a bog under the wheeling stars. No gold passed between them, no trick, only this, and it was, Donald thought, the truest thing that had happened to him in all his quiet life. At last the little man lifted his head and wiped his eyes with the back of one small hand and looked at Donald with something Donald had never seen on that face before. Not slyness, not mischief, gratitude, plain and deep. "You've given me something," Lorcan said, "that no crock of gold could buy." "You let me grieve out loud," Lorcan said, "for the first time in 1,000 years. Do you know what that is worth? To a creature who has been hunted and grabbed and squeezed for gold by every soul he's met, and never once simply sat with." He shook his head in wonder. "More than the crock, farmer. More than all the crocks in Ireland." And then the little man did something that made Donald's breath catch. He held up the single shoe, the shoe he had been mending for 1,000 years, the shoe of his lost child, and he turned it in the glow, and for the first time, Donald saw that it was finished, truly finished, complete. "It's done," the little man whispered, staring at it as if he could not believe it himself. "After all this time, it's done." He looked at Donald with shining eyes. "You finished it, not your hands, your question. You let me say the grief, and the grief was the last stitch. It's done." And as the words left him, a great soft light began to rise from the little man, and the finished shoe, gold and green and warm, spreading out across the dark bog, gentle as dawn. Something was changing, something 1,000 years in the making, and what it was, we will follow very soon, but not tonight's hurry. Let it glow a moment first. The light rose and spread until the whole bog glowed soft as a held breath, and in the heart of it, the little man stood, and he seemed for a moment taller, not in his body, in something else, as if a great weight had finally been set down. "For 1,000 years, the little man said quietly, I could not finish that shoe, not because my hands failed, because I would not let the grief be finished. I held it close. I thought if I kept mending, I kept her near. Do you understand that, farmer? The holding on?" Donald thought of his own life. The lean winters held on to as proof of struggle. The grudges kept warm, the way he too gripped his sorrows because letting them go felt like losing the ones they belonged to. "I understand," he said. "I think we all do that, in our way." "We do," said the little man, "every one of you. That is why I keep the gold and never let it be taken, not to be cruel, to teach the one lesson you all most need and least want, that the harder you grip a thing, the surer you are to lose it. Gold, grief, love, all the same." The glow began to fade, gently, like a fire settling for the night. The bog returned to its dark and its mist. But something had shifted that would not shift back. The little man tucked the finished shoe into his coat, against his heart, and for the first time his hands were empty of work. "And now," said Lorcan, "I have a trouble I have not had in 1,000 years. I have no shoe to mend." He looked at his empty hands, and a strange, wondering smile crossed his face. I don't quite know who I am, farmer, without the mending. Isn't that a thing? Maybe you know that feeling too. The strange hollow that comes when a long burden is finally lifted. You spend years longing to set it down, and when you do, you stand there lighter and lost, wondering who you are without the weight you carried so long. What will you do? Donald asked. The little man was quiet a while. I think, he said slowly, I will have to learn to make something new. A shoe for a foot that is still walking, perhaps, for a living child, instead of a lost one. I have forgotten how. It's been so long since I made anything but grief. And there it was, the new turn in the old story. Donald had thought his task was to warn the little man, or to ask him a question, or perhaps to win some gold after all, but the real task he saw now was only just beginning. The little man needed help remembering how to live. Come home with me, Donald said suddenly. He surprised himself with it. Just for a while. Una keeps a good fire. There's bread and warmth and no one hunting you, and maybe being among the living is how you remember to make for the living. Come home, little man, rest a while. The little man stared at him. No one, he said for the second time that night, has ever asked me that. To come in, to rest. They catch me to use me. They never once invite me. His voice cracked. You're a strange and dangerous man, Donald. You undo me with kindness. It's worse than any grabbing. Is that a yes? Donald asked, smiling. The little man laughed, a real laugh now. Not the dry coin-on-stone laugh of his tricking, but something warmer, rustier, long unused. It's a yes, you fool, he said. It's a yes. Take me home. Mind the bog on the way. I'll guide you. And so, for the second time, they crossed the dark bog together. But everything was different now. The little man rode on Donald's shoulder, light as a bird, calling the safe path not to trap, but to guide. Left foot there, mind the soft ground. They're firm now, you've got it. Two friends, going home. They talked as they walked. Donald told the little man about Una, about the lean years, about the barley and the cottage and his plain quiet life, and the little man listened, truly listened, the way no one had let him do, because no one had ever thought a leprechaun might want to simply hear about a human life. Tell me about her, the little man said. Una, your wife. What is she like? And Donald, walking through the gray dawn, found himself describing Una, her copper hair, her patience, the way she opened her arms when he came home with empty hands. And in the describing, he loved her more. The sun was rising as they came down into the valley. The barley caught the first light and turned to gold, real gold, the only kind a farmer truly owns, and the little man on Donald's shoulder went quiet, gazing at it. You have a fortune already, he murmured. You just walk past it every morning. Stay with that line a moment. You have a fortune already. You just walk past it every morning. The little man who guards a crock of gold, telling a poor farmer he is rich. The old story turning itself inside out, gently, the way the truest stories do. They reached the cottage as the smoke was rising from the chimney. Una was at the door, and when she saw Donald alive, smiling with a small green man on his shoulder, her hand flew to her mouth, and then she laughed, a bright, glad sound, and threw the door wide. Well, she said, you'd best both come in, then. And so a leprechaun came to sit by a human fire. He perched on the edge of a wooden stool, no bigger than the loaf on the table, and Una set a thimble of warm milk before him, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The little man looked at it, and at her, and his eyes filled again. You keep crying, little man, Una said gently, sitting across from him. Is it sorrow? He shook his small head. It's the opposite, he said. I have been wanted for my gold 1,000 years. I have never once been welcomed for myself. I did not know it could feel like this, like coming in from a very long cold. He stayed 3 days. He slept in a nest of wool by the warm hearth. He woke to the smell of Una's bread. He watched the two of them at their plain work and their plain love. And slowly, slowly, the rust came off his rusty heart, and he began to laugh more easily and to talk of other things than grief. On the third evening, the little man grew quiet and thoughtful. Donald noticed. What is it? He asked. The little man turned his green hat in his hands. It's time I went, he said. Not because I'm unhappy, because I'm whole again, and a whole thing has to go back out into the world and do its work and not hide forever by a kind fire. But before I go, he said, I owe you a thing, Not gold, you've taught me you don't want it, and I've taught you that you don't need it. Something else, a gift only a mended heart can give. He stood up on the table, small and earnest, and beckoned them both to lean close. And what gift the little man gave them, that is the heart of all the rest of this story, and we will come to it gently in its time. For now, simply hold the picture. A poor farmer, his copper-haired wife, and an ancient little man standing on their kitchen table, about to give them something worth more than gold. But there was a shadow on the horizon still. For though Cormac had turned from his greed, the rumor he had spread had not died. All through the valley, folk now knew that a leprechaun had been seen, and not just seen but caught and let go and even sheltered. And some of them were not done hunting. Word had traveled even beyond the valley now. Down the river, over the hills, into towns where harder and hungrier men than Cormac heard that a little fellow with a crock of gold had been living, of all things, in a poor farmer's cottage. And the worst of them began quietly to make the journey. The little man knew. Of course he knew, he always knew, that perhaps was the deeper reason he meant to leave, to draw the danger away from the kind cottage that had sheltered him. He would not let Donal and Una pay, in trampled fields and torchlit nights, for the simple crime of being good to him. "You're worried," Una said to him that last evening, reading his small, troubled face, "about the ones who are coming." The little man did not deny it. "They'll come hunting me here," he said, "and finding me gone, they may take their anger out on you. I won't have it, I have a plan. But you must trust me, both of you, even when it looks strange." "What plan?" Donal asked. The little man smiled, and there, just for a flash, was the old sly glint, the trickster's gleam, but turned now to a kindly purpose. "The same trick they always fall for," he said. "Greed. I'll give the hard men exactly what they're hunting, and it will lead them so far from this cottage they'll never find their way back to trouble you." And so the second great turn of the night was set. The little man, mended and whole, would play one last grand trick, not to cheat, but to protect, to lead the greedy far away and keep the kind ones safe. How he did it, and where it led, and what it cost, all that is still ahead. But the day has asked enough of you. Rest now, the plan can wait for the telling. The little man's plan was simple, as the best tricks always are. He would let himself be seen, out in the open hills, far from Donal's cottage, glowing soft at dusk, mending for show a single shoe. And the hard men hunting him would follow that glow like moths, away and away. "But I'll need a head start before they come," he told Donal and Una. "And I'll need you to do something hard. When they come asking, and they will, you must tell them the truth. That the little man left, that he went east, toward the mountains. Send them after me. Don't lie. Just point." "And then," Una asked, "what happens to you, out there, with hard men on your trail?" The little man smiled. "Nothing happens to me, dear heart. They cannot catch me. They never could. I'll lead them a merry dance through every bog and briar in Ireland, and lose them, and come back to see you when it's safe, if you'll have me back." "Always," Donal said. "You'll always have a place at this fire." And the little man had to look away for a moment, into the flames, before he could trust his voice again, a home to come back to, after 1,000 years. It was almost more than he could hold. They spent that last night together quietly. Una sang an old song, low and sweet. Donal mended a harness by the light, and the little man did something he had not done in 1,000 years. He sat with his empty hands folded in his lap, and he simply rested and listened and was content. In the gray before dawn, the little man slipped out. He stood a moment in the cottage doorway, looking back at the two sleeping figures by the banked fire, and he tipped his hat to them very gently and whispered something neither of them heard. Then he was gone into the morning mist. He went up into the high hills, to a bare hilltop where any glow would be seen for miles. And there, as the sun set red that evening, he settled himself in the open and took out his tools and began for the first time in 1,000 years to mend not the old shoe, but a brand new one for a living child. As bait, yes, but also perhaps as practice. Down in the valley, the hard men came, as the little man had known they would. 3 of them, then 5, then more, rough travelers with greedy eyes, knocking on cottage doors, asking after the leprechaun and his gold, and at last they came to Donal's door. "The little man with the gold," their leader growled. "We heard he sheltered here. Where is he?" And Donald, exactly as the little man had asked, told the simple truth. He was here, he said. He's gone now. Went up east, toward the mountains, 2 days back. You'll see his glow on the high hills at dusk, if you hurry. The greedy men did not even thank him. They turned at once and hurried east, toward the high hills, toward the faint gold glow already kindling on a far hilltop in the dusk. And Donald and Una stood in their doorway and watched them go, and let out a long breath, and the danger passed over their cottage like a cloud over the sun. And so began the little man's last great dance. For weeks the glow led the hunters on. It would kindle on one hilltop, draw them panting up the slope, and wink out, only to flare again miles off. On the next, east, then north, then up into the wild mountains where no farmer's field had ever been. One by one the hunters gave up. The journey was too hard, the glow too quick, the gold always one more hilltop away. They straggled home, footsore and empty-handed and a little wiser, until only the most stubborn one remained, their hard-eyed leader, who would not, could not, let go. His name was Bran, and he was the hardest of them all. He had hunted many things in his life, beasts and men and fortunes, and he had never once failed to take what he chased. The thought of being beaten by a creature the size of a cat drove him half mad. He climbed on into the high cold places, gripping his greed like a torch. And the little man, watching from his glow, grew thoughtful. For Bran did not give up, and a hunter who does not give up is a danger, not to the little man, who could not be caught, but to himself. The high mountains and the cold season kill the careless. The little man had not meant to lead anyone to his death. This is the trouble with leading the greedy astray. You mean only to lose them, but the truly stubborn ones will follow you off the edge of the world rather than admit defeat, and then their death is on your hands, whether you wished it or not. The little man knew this. He had learned it long ago in a way he had never forgiven himself for. For here, perhaps, was the deepest secret of the little man's long grief. The child whose single shoe he had mended for 1,000 years, that child, the old tales whispered, had followed a glow into the high mountains long ago and been lost in the cold and never come home. And the glow the child had followed had been the little man's own. Stay with that gently. The little man's whole long sorrow, his single endless shoe, it was guilt as much as grief. He had led a child he loved into the cold with his careless light, and lost it, and spent 1,000 years trying to mend what could not be mended. And now, here, was a man following his glow into that same cold death. The little man could have let it happen. Bran was a hard and greedy man, no innocent child. By the cold arithmetic of the world, his death would have been his own doing, but the little man had carried one death by his light for 1,000 years. He would not, could not carry another, not even a hard man's, not even now. So the little man stopped running, for the first time in his long life. He let himself be caught, on purpose. He kindled his glow bright and steady on a sheltered ledge, out of the killing wind, and he waited there, in the open, for the stubborn hunter to find him at last. Bran came over the ridge half frozen, his lips blue, his hands like claws, and there at last was the glow, steady and close, not winking out, not fleeing. The little man sitting calm on a ledge, looking up at him. Bran gave a cracked cry of triumph and lunged, and his stiff hands closed around the small green coat. Caught you, Bran rasped through chattering teeth. Caught you at last. Now the gold. Show me the gold or I'll. But the little man only looked at him with calm, sad eyes and said, You're dying, Bran. Your hands are frozen. Your blood is slowing. In an hour you'll sleep and never wake. The gold can't warm a dead man. Let me help you, you poor stubborn fool. Bran stared at the little man in his frozen hands. He had hunted this creature for weeks, half mad with greed. And now the creature he had finally caught was not begging, not bargaining, not tricking, but offering simply to save his life. It broke something in Bran that all the cold had not. Why? Bran whispered. The same question Cormac had asked at the bog. I hunted you. I'd have squeezed you dry. Why would you help me? And the little man said softly, Because I led you here. My glow brought you to this cold, and I have led one too many souls into the cold already. Set me down, Bran. Let me get you off this mountain alive. That's the only gold I have left to give. And Bran, the hardest of all the hunters, opened his frozen hands. The little man stepped free, and did not flee. Instead he kindled his glow warm and close around the dying man, and the warmth of it crept into Bran's blue hands, and his slowing blood, and his half-frozen heart. All that long, cold night, the little man kept his glow burning around the hunter and would not let him sleep the sleep that kills. He told him stories. He kept him talking. He warmed his hands and chafed his frozen feet and held the dark and the cold at bay with nothing but a small steady light and a stubborn refusal to let one more soul be lost. And when the gray dawn came at last over the cold peaks, Bran was alive. Stiff and weak and changed, but alive. He looked at the little man who had saved him, the creature he had hunted to the edge of the world, and he wept. The hard man wept, and could not say a word. "Go home, Bran," the little man said gently. "Down the mountain, the way I'll show you. Go home and live, and when men ask you about the leprechaun's gold, tell them the truth, that you found it, and it wasn't coins at all. It was your own life, given back to you by the thing you tried to rob. That's the only crock worth finding." And Bran went home. He came down out of the mountains a different man, and he never hunted gold again, and he told the tale truly all his days. And so the last of the hunters was undone, not by a trick, but by a mercy. The little man had protected Donal's cottage, and saved a hard man's life, and asked nothing in return. But something had happened to the little man up on that cold peak, in the saving of Bran. By kindling his glow to warm a dying man, the very glow that had once led a child to death. He had done a thing he had never managed in 1,000 years of mending. He had used his light to save, instead of to lose, and in that, at last the old guilt began to thaw. He sat a long while on that peak as the sun rose, the new little shoe he had been making in his hands, and he understood finally what the finished shoe had meant, and what Donal's question had begun, and what saving Bran had completed. The child was gone, but the love did not have to stay a wound. It could become a light that saved others. That was the mending. Maybe you have a grief like that, a loss you have kept as a wound, mending it and mending it, afraid that if it healed you would lose the one it belonged to all over again. The little man's long story whispers something to you, very softly. That love does not have to stay a wound. It can become the light you give to others. The little man rose at last and started down the mountain. Not east, away from everything. West, home. Toward a certain valley, and a certain cottage, and a certain fire, and 2 people who had told him he would always have a place there. He walked lightly, the new shoe in his coat, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he was not running from anything. It took him days. He was in no hurry. He walked through autumn country, past fields being harvested, past children playing, past all the ordinary human life he had watched from Hedges for 1,000 years and never once joined, and now and then he stopped and helped. A mended fence, a found lamb, a small lost shoe set right by a sleeping child's bed. For he had found in the saving of Bran the work he was made for after all, not hoarding gold, not guarding a crock, not mending one endless shoe of grief, but mending the small broken things of living people, quietly, in the night, asking nothing, the way the old kind house fairies once did, long before anyone thought to hunt them for treasure. Word of these kindnesses spread too, in time, but a different word than before. Not there's gold to be had, but there's a small good spirit who mends things in the night, if your heart is kind. And folk left out thimbles of milk, and did not try to catch him, and the little man was, for the first time in 1,000 years, welcome wherever he went. And what of the crock of gold? It stayed buried under its 1,000 red garters on that distant hill. The little man never went back to it. He did not need it anymore. He had found a wealth that did not have to be guarded, because it could not be stolen, the simple worth of being useful, and welcome, and at peace. Here's the part the old tales never quite say aloud, but always mean. The crock of gold was never the treasure. It was the test. The treasure was always the thing the little man learned, and the thing Donal learned, and the thing Bran learned on the cold peak. The gold was just the bait that taught it. The little man came down at last into the familiar valley on a soft autumn evening, with the smell of turf smoke in the air. He saw the cottage ahead, its one window lit gold, and his old heart, mended now, truly mended, beat quick with something he had not felt in 1,000 years. He felt like someone coming home. But before we open that door and see what waits inside, let the old story rest a moment and tell you how it came to be told at all. How a tale like this traveled down the long years, from firelit cottages to the night you're hearing it now. For a very long time, no one wrote these tales down. They lived in the air, by the fire, in the voices of grandmothers and traveling men. A story like this one would be told on a winter night, with the wind outside and the turf glowing, to a circle of listening faces, exactly as it is being told to you now. The Irish called such a storyteller a Siancaí, a keeper of the old lore. He carried hundreds of tales in his memory, and walked from house to house, and was given a seat by the fire and a meal in exchange for a night of stories. He was, you might say, a cousin of the little man, a wanderer, welcome wherever his gift was wanted. And so the tale of the leprechaun and his gold was told and retold, changing a little each time, the way a stone smooths in a stream. Some tellers made it funny, some made it sad, some kept only the trick of the garters and forgot the grief beneath. But the heart of it always stayed, the little man, the gold, the lesson of the open hand. Only much later did scholars come with their notebooks and write the tales down, gathering them from the last of the old tellers before the firesides went quiet. And so the little man was saved a second time, not by mercy this time, but by memory, caught at last, gently, in ink, so he could go on being told. So when you hear this tonight, you are part of that long chain, grandmother to child, teller to listener, page to voice, down 1,000 years to you, here, now, in the dark, drifting toward sleep. Hold that gently, now, back to the valley, and the lit window, and the little man's hand upon the door. The little man knocked. A small sound. 3 soft taps on the wood. Tap, tap, tap. The very sound that had begun the whole story, once, in a hawthorn hedge. And inside, by the fire, Donald lifted his head, and his heart leapt, because he knew that sound better than any other in the world. He flung the door wide, and there in the dusk stood the little man, smaller than the doorstep, his green hat tipped, his lined face shining with a joy it had never worn in all his 1,000 years. "I told you I'd come back," he said, "if you'd have me," and Donald scooped him up in both hands and laughed, and called for Una, and the homecoming was complete. That night they sat by the fire, the 3 of them, and the little man told them everything, the long dance through the hills, the hard men one by one giving up, and Bran, and the cold peak, and the saving, and when he came to the part about the child, and the glow, and the old guilt, he told them that too. He had never told a living soul, he found he could, now. And when he had finished, Una reached out one finger and touched his small shoulder, very gently, and said, "You've mended more than shoes, little one, you've mended yourself." And the little man looked at his own empty hands, and then at the new small shoe he had made for a living child, and he smiled and said, "Yes, I think I have." But there was one more thing the little man had come to give, the gift he had promised on his first visit, the night before he left, the gift he had stood on the kitchen table to offer, and then held back, because he had not yet been whole enough to give it truly. Now he was whole, and now he could. "I made this shoe," the little man said, holding up the new one. Bright and small, for a living child, I thought, on the cold mountain, that it was only practice, relearning my craft. But I see now I was making it for someone real, for a child not yet born. He looked at Una, and at Donald, and his old eyes shone. "Your child, the one who is coming." Una's hand went to her belly, and her eyes filled, and Donald looked at her and understood all at once the thing the little man had known before either of them. A child, coming in the spring. The lean years were ending, not with gold, but with this. With a small new life and a small new shoe waiting to fit it. And so the little man gave the family not gold, but a gift only a mended heart could give. He had spent 1,000 years mending one shoe for a child who was gone. And now he made a new shoe for a child who was coming, and in the giving of it, the long circle of his grief closed gently into joy. "Will you stay?" Una asked him, holding the little shoe to her heart. "Stay, and see the child born, and know it as it grows." And the little man was quiet a long while, and then he said gently, "For a while. Not forever. My work is out there now, the small mendings, the night kindnesses. But I'll come back to this fire, always. This is my home now, if you'll keep it for me." "We'll keep it," Donald said. "A seat by the fire, a thimble of milk, and a place that's yours, whenever you wander back. That's a bargain, little man, the only bargain I ever wanted to make with you." And the little man laughed, the warm, rusty laugh, and reached up his small hand, and Donald took it, finger to fist, and the bargain was sealed. And so it was. The little man stayed through the winter. He mended things about the cottage. He told Una and Donald 1,000 old tales by the fire. He helped through the cold months, and when the wind howled, his soft glow kept the dark corners warm. and slowly the lean valley brightened around the kindness that had taken root in it. Maybe you can feel the season turning, even here, even now, drifting toward sleep. The long cold of a grief held too tight. The slow warmth of a hand finally opened. The way spring always comes, in the end, to those who learn to let the winter go. Stay there a moment, in that turning. It is a gentle place to rest. Spring came, the barley was sown, and one soft morning, in the whitewashed cottage by the turf fire, Una's child was born, a small, loud, healthy child, with a cry like a new lamb and a grip like a little fist of life. And the little man, who had not wept for joy in 1,000 years, wept for joy then. They set the little man's shoe by the cradle. It would not fit for a year yet. The child was far too small, but it sat there, bright and waiting, the first thing the little man had made in 1,000 years for a life that was beginning instead of one that had ended. And every time he looked at it, the last of his old grief grew quieter. The years went on as years do. The child grew, first crawling, then walking, then running barefoot through the barley, until at last the little shoe fit, and then was outgrown and a new one made, and the little man came and went, wandering the country with his kindnesses, but always, always returning to that fire. And the child grew up knowing the little man not as a creature of greed and tricks, but as a beloved odd uncle by the fire, the small green friend who mended shoes and told stories and glowed soft in the dark to keep the nightmares away. To that child, a leprechaun was never a thing to catch for gold. He was simply family. Down in the valley and beyond, the old greedy rumors faded. No one hunted the leprechaun in that country anymore. They had learned through Donal and Cormac and Bran and 100 quiet kindnesses that you cannot catch luck and squeeze it for gold. But you can welcome it and feed it milk and let it mend the small broken things of your life. And the crock of gold. It is still there, they say, on that distant hill, under its 1,000 red garters, gone soft and gray with the years, sleeping, waiting, for the next tired soul who thinks that gold is the thing they are missing. The little man does not guard it anymore. He does not need to. The trick guards itself. For anyone who finds it, and digs, and grasps, will learn the same old lesson the hard way. And anyone who learns to open their hand instead, to want the fire more than the gold, the welcome more than the crock, will find they never needed to dig at all. The treasure was the lesson. It always was. Donal lived a long life and a contented one. Not a rich life by the measure of coins, but by every other measure, a warm fire, a loving wife, a child who grew strong, and a small green friend who had taught him that the open hand holds more than the closed fist ever could. Donal was, in the end, one of the wealthiest men in all of Ireland. And the little man? He is out there still, the old folks say, mending small broken things in the night, glowing soft in dark corners to keep the nightmares away, wandering the green country with his tools and his thimble, asking nothing, welcome everywhere, no longer hunted, no longer hiding, no longer alone. Perhaps on some quiet night, in some quiet place, you might hear him yourself. A small steady sound, far off and soft, in a hedge or a corner or the back of an old house. Tap, 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 the little hammer, mending. If you do, the old folks say, don't grab, just listen, and leave out a little milk. That is the whole of the story, the catching and the trick and the grief and the mending and the long, slow turning of a closed fist into an open hand. But a story this old has gathered meanings the way an old coat gathers warmth. And those meanings are worth a quiet look before we say goodnight. Think of how the story began. A tired man, hearing a small sound in a hedge, and wanting not riches exactly, but rest, relief, an end to the lean years. The gold was never really about gold. It was about the longing for enough. We all know that longing. We carry it to bed with us. And think of the trick of the garters. 1,000 red knots, and the true one lost among them. How often the thing we want is real and right there, and yet made unreachable, not by anyone's cruelty, but by our own grasping, our own haste, our own refusal to ask the right question at the right time. And think, most of all, of the single shoe. 1,000 years of mending one small shoe for someone gone. The grief we hold so tightly we cannot finish it. Because finishing it feels like letting go of the love. The little man's deepest secret is the most human thing in the whole tale. The old people did not write these meanings down in plain words. They did not have to. They simply told the story and let it do its quiet work. the way it is doing its quiet work in you now, as you drift, as your breath slows, as the day lets go of you at last. There is a comfort in it, isn't there? The idea that even an ancient grief can be mended, that even 1,000 years of holding on can end, one quiet evening, with a kind question and an open hand. That it is never ever too late to set the heavy thing down and be warm by a fire. And there is a gentleness in the way the little man learned it, not through punishment, not through loss piled on loss, but through one human being who looked at him and wondered simply what he might be carrying. Sometimes that is all it takes. Someone to ask, someone to sit beside you on the stone in the dark. Maybe somewhere in your own life, there is a heavy thing you have been mending and mending, afraid to finish. The old story does not tell you to drop it tonight. It only whispers that you could, someday. That the finishing is not a forgetting. That love set down gently becomes a light instead of a weight. These are the things the little man knew, and the things Donald learned, and the things the old tellers wrapped inside a story about gold so that they would be easy to carry and hard to forget. A trick of the storyteller, you might say. The gentlest kind of trick. The kind that gives instead of takes. So if you remember anything of this story tomorrow when the day asks its hard questions of you again, let it be this. The harder you grip, the less you hold. The kindest question can finish an ancient grief, and the gold at the rainbow's foot was always only the warmth you already have at home. The fire is low now. The story is nearly told. There is only the little man, somewhere out in the soft Irish dark, tapping gently at some small broken thing, glowing faint, keeping the nightmares from some sleeping child's door. Perhaps from yours. Tap, 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 slower now, softer. Let your hands open, where they rest. Let the grip of the day loosen, finger by finger. You do not have to hold anything tonight. Not the worries, not the wantings, not the heavy mended things. Set them down on the stone in the dark. The little man will keep them safe till morning. We are nearly at the end of the night's telling. Just a little further, and the story will lay itself down beside you, and the glow will dim, and the tapping will fade into the soft dark, and there will be only your breath, and the quiet, and rest. But first, one last small look at where the little man has wandered, in the long years since. For the little man wandered far beyond that one green valley, in the long years after. His story crossed the sea, in the memories of those who left Ireland, carried to new lands the way the Sainchaí once carried tales from house to house, and so the lone shoemaker of the hedges became known all over the world. But something happened to him, out in that wide world, the way things happen to stories that travel far from home. The grief was forgotten, the single shoe was forgotten. The lesson of the open hand grew faint, and what remained in many a far retelling was only the smallest part of him, the green coat, the gold, and the trick. He became a little luck charm, a figure on a coin, a face on a sign, a small grinning man chased for his pot of gold in 100 cheerful tales that forgot he had ever wept. It is the fate of many an old deep thing, to be loved at last, but loved shallowly, for its surface and not its heart. But the old folk who knew him truly never forgot, and on quiet nights, by quiet fires, the deeper tale was still told, the one with the single shoe, and the grief, and the mending, the one you have heard tonight, so that the little man's true heart would not be lost beneath all that cheerful gold. And now you are one of the keepers too. You have heard the true tale, not just the gold, but the grief beneath it, and the open hand that mended it. Hold it gently. Pass it on someday if you like. Now let us bring the little man and ourselves gently home to rest. Out in the soft Irish dark, the little man finishes his small night's work. He sets down his awl. He tucks his tools away. He stands and stretches his old small body and looks up at the wheeling stars, the same stars that wheeled over the bog the night a tired farmer sat beside him and asked the kindest question of his 1,000 years. He thinks of Donald, long gone now, and Una, and the child who grew and all the children of that child, down the years, who left out milk for him and never once tried to grab. He thinks of the fire that was always kept for him, and his old heart is full and quiet and at peace. There is no more grief in him now. There is no more running. There is only the small good work, and the wide soft dark, and the welcome that waits in every kind house in the land. The little man who could never be caught at last, not by a grasping hand, but by a gentle one. And maybe that is the truest ending the old story has. Not gold won, not gold lost, but a lonely thing made welcome. A wound made into a light, a trickster taught by simple kindness how to be loved. The little man found his crock of gold in the end. It was a fire and a family and a place to come home to. The night is deep now. Your breath is slow. The story has nearly laid itself down. There is only a little further to go, a few soft words, a gentle goodnight, and then the quiet. Let yourself sink toward it. You do not have to stay awake to reach the end. The end will find you, gently, wherever you drift. Far off, so far it might be a dream, the small hammer taps, tap, 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 slower, softer. A sound that began this story in a hawthorn hedge and now carries it gently to its close. The little man, mending the small broken things of the world while the world sleeps. Maybe you can feel your own hands resting open now. Maybe the worries of the day have loosened their grip, the way the little man finally loosened his. There is nothing to catch tonight, nothing to hold. Only the warm dark and the slow breath and the soft far tapping and rest. The fire settles, the glow dims, the little man's tapping grows fainter and fainter until it is no louder than your own slow heartbeat in the dark. He is keeping watch, he is mending the night. You are safe to let go now, you are safe to drift. We will leave the little man there, in the soft Irish dark, glowing faint, tapping slow, watching over all the sleeping fields and all the sleeping souls, including, tonight, you. He does not mind if you have already drifted. He has watched over sleepers for a very long time. It is, perhaps, what he loves most. There is almost nothing left to say. The story is told. The lesson is given, gently. The way the old folk gave it, wrapped in green and gold, easy to carry into sleep. The little man's grief is mended. His hands are at peace, and so, I hope, are yours. In just a moment, the night's telling will come fully to rest. There will be a soft good night, and a whisper of what waits for another evening, and then the quiet you have been sinking toward all along. Stay there, in the warm dark. The end is gentle. The end is near. Let it come. And so we come to the very heart of it, the truest moment of the whole long tale. Not the gold, not the trick, but a tired farmer and a grieving little man, side by side on a stone in the dark, and one gentle question that changed them both forever. That was the real treasure. That was the crock at the rainbow's foot. For in all the world, across all its gold and all its grasping, there is nothing rarer or richer than this to be truly seen. To have someone look at the thing you carry and not try to take it and not try to fix it, but simply ask, gently, what it weighs. The little man waited 1,000 years for that. Some wait longer. And the gift the little man gave in return was not the crock of gold he had guarded so long. It was the thing he learned by being seen, that love, set down at last, becomes a light. He carried that light out into the world and mended 1,000 small broken things with it, and lit 1,000 dark corners, all from one kind question on one quiet night. That is the whole secret of the leprechaun's gold, the one the cheerful tales forgot. The treasure was never in the crock, it was in the open hand, and the kind question, and the grief allowed to become a light. The richest thing in all of Ireland was a farmer with empty pockets and a heart wide enough to ask. Hold that, as the story lays itself down. The open hand holds more than the closed fist. The kind question is worth more than the crock, and the gold at the rainbow's foot was always, only, the warmth you carry home. Rest now. The tale is nearly over. There is only the quiet goodnight to come. The story is told now. Let us sit with it a little. The way you sit with a fire that has burned low, there are quiet meanings in it, and they are gentle to hold as you drift. Think first of the crock of gold. In every telling it can be found but never kept. That was the old people's quiet way of saying something true. The thing you chase hardest is the thing that slips away. Fortune does not like a grasping hand. And think of the rule, never look away. The old folk knew the mind. They knew the thing we want most slips free the moment our attention wavers. The whole little man was built around that simple human truth. But the deepest symbol in this telling was the single shoe. One small shoe mended for 1,000 years. A grief held so tightly it could never be finished. The old people knew that grief too. We all carry one shoe somewhere, mending and mending. And the mending of it, that was the heart of the whole tale. Not by force, not by gold, but by one gentle question asked by one kind man that let an ancient grief be spoken out loud at last. Sometimes that is all a wound needs, to be seen. Think of the open hand and the closed fist. The whole story turns on it. Cormac gripped and got nothing. Bran grasped and nearly died. Donal opened his hand and lost the gold, yes, but gained a friend, a lesson, and a wealth no Crock could hold. There is an old wisdom in that, older than the little man himself. The things that matter most cannot be seized. Love, peace, belonging, rest. They come only to the open hand. Grip them and they slip away. Hold them gently and they stay. And think of how the little man changed. He began as a trickster, guarding gold he did not need, mending a grief he would not finish. He ended as a gentle helper, mending the small broken things of living people. The same hands. A wholly different work. That change is the quiet promise the story holds out to anyone who hears it. That even an ancient pattern can be broken. That even 1,000 years of grasping and grieving can end, one quiet evening, with a kindness. It is never too late to become gentle. Think, too, of Donal, an ordinary man, not a hero, not a king, a tired farmer who wanted only rest, and his quiet decency, pulling hard men from the bog, asking the kind question, opening his hand, turned out to be the strongest force in the whole tale. The old stories loved that. The ordinary person whose goodness outweighs all the grasping kings and hard hunters. They told it again and again, in 100 shapes, because they wanted us to remember, the gentlest hand is often the strongest one of all. And think of the gold that stayed buried, under its 1,000 red garters, wanted by no one in the end. The treasure was never the point. The treasure was only the test. What mattered was who you became while chasing it, or while learning to stop. This is why the tale has lasted so long. Not for the gold, for the truth wrapped inside the gold, that what we chase shapes us, that kindness mends what force cannot, that the open hand is the richest hand. These are old truths, and gentle ones, and worth carrying into sleep. Maybe there is a single shoe in your own life. A grief you have been mending and mending, afraid to finish. The story does not ask you to finish it tonight, it only whispers that you could, someday, and that the finishing would not be a forgetting. For the little man learned that love, set down at last, does not vanish. It becomes a light. The child he lost did not leave him when his grief was mended. The love simply changed its shape, from a wound he carried to a warmth he gave away. That perhaps is the most comforting thing the old story holds, that nothing loved is ever truly lost. That grief, given time and kindness, can become a way of warming others, that the people we carry do not weigh us down forever. They can become our light. These are big thoughts for the edge of sleep. You do not have to hold them tightly. Let them rest on you lightly, like a blanket. The story has done its quiet work. Whatever you needed from it, it has given in its gentle old way. The little man would tell you not to grasp even at the meanings. Hold them with an open hand, the way he learned to hold everything. Let the ones you need stay. Let the rest drift off into the dark. That is enough. That is plenty. The fire is almost out now. The meanings are spoken. There is only a little more to say, a few words about how this little man came down the long years to us, and then the soft good night you have been drifting toward all along. So let your breath go slow, let your hands stay open. The little man keeps his watch in the soft dark, and the story has settled gently over you, and there is nothing left to do tonight but rest. We are nearly at the good night now. Stay with me just a little longer. The little man of the hedges never quite left us. He came down the long years, from firelit Irish cottages to nearly every corner of the world. You have surely met him, in one shape or another, long before tonight. He became one of the best-known little folk in all the world. A small green man, a pot of gold, a rainbow's end, his face on coins and signs, and 1,000 cheerful tales. Beloved everywhere, though often, as traveling stories are, loved only for his surface. The wider world kept the gold and the green and the grin. It forgot the single shoe, and the grief, and the open hand. That is the way of it with old stories that wander far. The bright parts travel easily. The deep parts stay home by the fire. But the deep parts were never truly lost. They waited, in the old collections, in the memories of the last firesides, in the quiet tellings that kept the single shoe alive. Waiting for someone to ask the right question. Waiting, perhaps, for a night like this one. And here is the gentle truth of it. Every time someone tells the fuller tale, the grief beneath the gold, the open hand, the mending, the little man is welcomed home again. made whole again, seen for his true heart and not just his bright coat. So the little man's legacy is not really the pot of gold or the rainbow or the charm on the coin. It is the quiet lesson that has survived under all of that. That what we chase shapes us, that kindness mends what force cannot, that the open hand is the richest hand of all. And maybe his legacy lives wherever someone leaves a small kindness in the night and asks for nothing back, wherever someone sits beside a grieving friend and simply asks what they carry, wherever a closed fist learns gently to open, the little man is there, still mending. You carry a little of that legacy now too. You have heard the deep tale, not just the bright one. You know about the single shoe. And that knowing keeps the little man's true heart alive a while longer, passed gently to you, here, in the dark, at the edge of sleep. That is the whole of his long journey through the years, from a hedge in old Ireland, to a coin in a far country, to a quiet voice in your dark room tonight. A small green man, mending older than the hills, gentler than the gold, welcome at last, wherever his true story is told. And now the story has nowhere left to travel but into your sleep. The fire is out, the little man keeps his watch. There is only the soft goodnight to come. Let your breath go slow. Let the warm dark gather you. We are there now, at the very edge of rest. The story is told now. The fire is low. There is nothing left to hold tonight, only the soft dark and your slow breath and rest. Far off in the dark, the small hammer taps, slow and soft. Tap, tap, tap. The little man mending the night while you drift. There's another story waiting, for another night, somewhere warmer, older, where the sun falls heavy on ancient stone. But that is for another evening. Tonight, just this. Just the quiet and the dark and the rest you have earned. We'll be here when you're ready. Another old story, another quiet night like this one. No hurry. Let your hands stay open. Let the day's grip loosen. There is nothing to catch tonight, nothing to keep. The little man keeps his watch. The gold sleeps on its hill, and you are safe to drift now into the soft dark. Slower now, softer. The tapping fades, the glow dims. There is only your breath, and the quiet, and rest. Sleep well now. The old story has done its work. It will be here in the morning, and so will the quiet. Good night. Rest gently. The little man is mending the dark, and the morning will keep. Sleep now. Sleep.